It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about TKO's earnings call. We're also going to talk about some of their finances that stem from their SEC filings that came out this week. We're going to talk about all the things that Mark Shapiro said, and we're even going to talk about something that an MMA manager said when he wrote an article for MMA Junkie. But before we get into all of these things, we're going to ask that you pick up a paid subscription so that you have access to everything, because all of our episodes, about half of them, end up behind a paywall. So when you click on to listen to this episode at about the 30-minute mark, you're going to find yourself with a little bumper that says that, surprise, surprise, this is all you get. If you want to go any further and listen to the rest of the episode, gotta pony up. So just be prepared for that. That's how we keep the lights on around here. Now, John, how the heck are you?
Fairly good. It's a beautiful day here in Los Angeles, and I have not gone outside at all today. So I guess I'm not fairly good. I'm feeling a little down. I'm feeling a little regretful that we're recording right now. When I look out at the blue sky outside, just finished work, and I could squeeze in like a hike up Runyon Canyon or something like that.
You know, today for us way over here in Texas, it was overcast all freaking day. All day it was gray and gloomy.
Well, boo-hoo. I'm in LA. I'm worried about me. This is about me we're talking about. It's not you, not about the listeners, not about anybody else, but me. How should my day go?
So, I guess we should get this puppy rolling. And as always, the OG listeners around here know that we always start our shows in a certain way. And that certain way is by reviewing any updates to the UFC antitrust cases. So, John, do we have any?
We do. We have something to talk about. I mean, some of it's not super exciting and some of it's downright boring, but we do have something. So, and there is something that's potentially interesting. The first thing I want to note is I have to make a correction for last episode. There's two things I said that were just fundamentally wrong and kind of drove me nuts after we're done recording, as you can attest to, because I sent you a message saying, man, I screwed two things up. One is, I believe, now I haven't gone back and re-listened to the show, I believe I added a digit to the number of, added a zero, I should say, to the amount that Inoue's fight generated. So where I should have said 10 billion, I might have said 100 billion. I don't know why I said that, because I know oddly enough, I know my yen conversion, Japanese yen conversion, but I think I said that. I think I added a zero to the number. So,
because remember I said 5 billion, you said no, 100 billion.
Oh my God. Well, I think I meant to say 10 billion was the total or whatever, but it's still, that drove me nuts after I said that. And I'm going to blame, I had someone over that night and they walked in the room and drove me nuts. So they interrupted the show and they know not to do that. The other thing I got wrong, probably, I guess this is less grievous, because there was in Southern California, I mentioned in the Cajun Johnson v. Zuffa case, or Johnson v. Zuffa, because it also includes C.B. Dalloway and Tristan Connolly. So Cajun's last name is the only entry. That's just how they abbreviate it. There was some filing in a related case to the Johnson v. Zuffa case in Southern California's district court. And that was an order on a motion to enforce out-of-district subpoena and order on motion to quash. And I had accidentally said, and I think we even talked about it briefly, that was related to Iridium, Jason House's attorney management company. And I really screwed that up because and I guess my defense is there's no documents there you can download to actually see who's involved in the case. You have to figure this out through other documents that were filed a long time ago in the case. This was actually related to Paradigm, which you had brought up. which is Adi Attar's company. So it's not Jason House's and Iridium's company that has a motion to enforce an out-of-district subpoena against and who has filed a motion to quash against it. It is Adi Attar's Paradigm in Southern California that's done that. So they're done. Now, we have not seen anything filed against Iridium, and my guess, as I said before, maybe that's why we haven't seen it, or it's been filed somewhere else. We haven't found which district or which federal court it's been filed in. Is that I believe Iridium is staffed by nothing but attorneys, and so they might be declaring client attorney privilege.
Paradigm is loaded with attorneys too. Most of their agents are attorneys.
That might be what they're trying to quash, and that might be why also that a lot of the material is not posted to Pacer, so you can't actually see it, because if it's attorney-client privilege, they're not going to share it with the public like they do other filings. So that's one. That's my correction. I really screwed up there, but I'm correcting myself here. I'm going to blame other people, obviously, because I never honestly make a mistake. But to this week, though, we have a couple things, updates. One is there were several documents filed in the antitrust case in the normal district of Nevada with Judge Boulware, and those all relate to defendants' motion to seal. All the defendants, which are Zuffa, TKO, and Endeavor, collectively, they are the defendants in this case. They jointly moved to seal certain exhibits attached to the plaintiff's motion to challenge and defendants' privilege designations. Specifically, they seek to seal Exhibits 6 and 13, they say, which is apparently a text message thread between Mark Shapiro and Andrew Schleimer containing private business strategy. That's me doing air quotes over here. And also Exhibits 8 through 12, which redacts phone numbers appearing in those text messages. So that's one of the documents. The other documents is a separate motion to seal, where Zuffa and TKO filed their own motion to seal the unredacted version of their opposition to the plaintiff's privilege challenge. The opposition briefs itself reference confidential details from Exhibit 6, the privilege log. So they seek to file the full version under seal while making a redacted public version available. So we will get a redacted version of that. And I'm not sure why. Apparently, those redactions are targeted specifically to lines that describe the substance of privilege log entries. So I don't know if it's business related, embarrassing, sensitive, what, but that's the filings they have, the motions to seal that were filed in Nevada. The final thing that I want to mention was that was brought to my attention by our buddy Jason Cruz at MMA Payout, is that the Ninth Circuit, they have a Form 20 Notice of Intent to Unseal he posted, and that relates to the Cirkunov v. Zuffa case. Now, if you don't recall, listeners, Cirkunov v. Zuffa is basically Johnson v. Zuffa, but it's Misha Cirkunov seeking to represent all those fighters that signed arbitration agreements and class action waivers. So this is a standard Ninth Circuit form, this Ninth Circuit Form 20, notifying all the parties that the defendants intend to file certain documents publicly, even though they were previously sealed at the district court record level, and they plan to file excerpts of record containing an unredacted version of defendant's motion to compel arbitration, an excerpt of Cirkunov's October 6th, 2020 promotional agreement with the UFC. I don't think anybody's going to get too worked up about that. And they're also going to file the defendant's opening brief, which quotes and references the sealed material from Volume 3. So under the Ninth Circuit Rule 2713F, I have this written down because obviously as a non-attorney, I would not know that at the top of my head. If no other party files a motion to maintain the seal within 21 days, these documents will be automatically unsealed without further notice, so they'll be made public to us. The other party's position field was left blank, suggesting defendants don't know plaintiff's stance at the time of filing. And this all relates to a separate UFC related appeal involving the fighter's contract dispute. And so this is about Zuffa demanding that this go to arbitration rather than Judge Boulware overseeing it. So this has huge potential implications for the Misha the Cirkunov v. Zuffa case, which has huge implications for the Johnson v. Zuffa case. So this is very important right now, and we will probably have at least the briefs and stuff that were filed in 3 weeks to look over and see what's happening in that case.
Wow. So this could be a potential game changer for both of those cases.
It potentially could. I don't think it would be immediately decided, but down the line, yes. I think this is the Cirkunov v. Zuffa is very, very important because, as you know, about half of the current fighters in the Johnson case, and the new fighters always enter it as new fighters sign with the UFC, have signed the arbitration agreement and class action waivers, which means technically they cannot be part of the class action. They cannot be class members if class certification is granted to Johnson, that class. And so that eliminates huge numbers of fighters who will, which eliminates the potential damages, which gives the more weight leverage to the plaintiffs. But also if there's a settlement or a victory, a win with damages awarded, those fighters lose out on those damages. So it potentially huge repercussions, implications for the case, and who knows how it's going to go. But let's just thank the Supreme Court a few years ago that made it possible, even the possibility that you could cram arbitration agreements and class action waivers down people's throats, even when you are accused of having monopoly power.
Wasn't that something that Lena Khan was actively working to get dismantled?
No, because she had really no say over that. That's a regulation the FTC didn't have any control over. But it is one of, this is just not me talking. I know some people are like, "Oh, John, you're so biased." So many people that follow our legal system were amazed that the Supreme Court, even though it's, they're reading just the technical, the text of the original law, I guess textualism, the originalism they're going with, the original law of the Federal Arbitration Agreement, that they would permit the possibility that if you were accusing a company of having monopoly power, that you would then also permit them to possibly use that monopoly power to force or market power, let's just say it that way, use their market power to force vendors, employees, whatever, to sign away their right to sue them for abusing their market power. It's just an absurd ruling. And yet, it's not the first in the United States. We have numerous absurd Supreme Court rulings, but this is perhaps one of the worst, most recent ones. All
right. Time to move on to TKO's SEC filings that came out this week. What did we learn from them about TKO and UFC's finances?
Well, a lot, actually. There was a lot of details in here, which, I guess kind of expected. We had our eyes open, too, because this was the first quarter under the Paramount deal, if you recall. Mm-hmm. Now, under the TKO Group holdings, which is the whole company, which includes UFC, WWE, Professional Bull Riders, IMG, and other entities wrapped up that include the Zuffa Boxing they started. That company, the parent company, TKO Group Holdings, their total revenue for the year was for the quarter, I should say, was $1.597 billion, 20%. That's up 26% from quarter one last year. Their net income was only $89.4 million, though. Their adjusted EBITDA for the quarter was $549.8 million. And here's the really impressive thing: their free cash flow was $675 million. Now, a big portion of that, like $580 million, is the FIFA World Cup 2026 prepayments. But that's the parent company. But I'm not quite as interested in the parent company because we talk combat sports. So I'm much more interested in the UFC and Zuffa Boxing. So if we look at just the UFC, we see that their revenue was $401 million. Their EBITDA was $254.5 million. Now, EBITDA, for those who are not familiar with it, is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That $254.5 million is a 63.4% margin. So that means basically 2/3 of every dollar they spend, their operational expenses that they have to spend to earn that dollar, they are left with 66 cents, 63.4 cents to be exact. Now with the UFC itself, it had some other details. They still have debt, 2.15 billion, so 2.1 billion, let's just say, which, I know a lot of people bring that up, but if you look at their interest, that's $128 million a year, or, I guess if their total debt service, you want to use the amortization, 155 million, so less than 40 million. So if their EBITDA before the interest is 254 million and they're only paying 40 million in interest, that means they have a lot of money left over, right? And we should know too, they use for EBITDA adjusted EBITDA, which is a unique formulation, which includes they do things like they have to add back certain operational costs that they've deducted. So like equity-based compensation, apparently, non-cash compensation paid to employees and executives in the form of stock. They add that back into their EBITDA, their adjusted EBITDA, and I don't mind that actually because it still shows the health of the company because that's almost like profits being taken out that they're giving to these executives. It's for us that are trying to discuss the fighter pay issues like that. It helps to get a better picture of what money would be available to pay the fighters, and that's not something that automatically is be taken out for their to keep the lights on and the doors open for business to keep functioning. They also don't include the one-time expenses related to mergers and acquisitions for like WWE. Again, I don't have a problem with that because it doesn't that affects more TKO than the UFC itself's core business. They also don't include the legal settlements because and I don't mind that as well that they add that back for our purposes because I don't think we should hold current fighters. We should not allow the company to claim those expenses as a reason why they can't compensate current fighters. So that's just a quick explanation I figured I had to give about the EBITDA. So the company's extremely profitable. The other interesting thing we saw here was it gave us kind of a glimpse of what kind of business they're now going to do with the new media rights deal. Because under the new media rights deal, they saw according to them, the filing, there was 51.2 million increase due to media rights, production, and content revenue. Right, so they had their revenue rose by 41.5 million first quarter, but there was a loss in live events because they did fewer live events. But they had 51.2 million increase in revenue that was credited to the segment of media rights, production, and content revenue. And I'm betting the vast majority of that is part of this new deal. So that's a massive increase in the media rights that they have right there. We're seeing if over a year, if that's all, let's say all, if we can credit all that to Paramount, and I don't think we can, but if we could, that's at least 200 million for the year additional money that's been added from the Paramount deal right now. And on top of that, it's even more impressive when you consider last year, when we're comparing it to last year, these numbers, they only had 10 events in quarter one, 2 numbered events and 8 fight nights. This year, we only had 8 events, 2 numbered events and 6 fight nights. So with 2 fewer events, we saw the media rights segment go up 51.2 million in value. So they are, for the year, I estimate based on this, you can make a rough estimate that revenue should not go up probably 200 million, I bet you, for the year. I bet you when they have more events and stuff, it will probably be, we will see instead of the a slight increase of maybe a $300-400 million increase over last year in total revenue. Wow.
That's a lot. That's a whole lot.
That is a lot. And we get none of that. I don't know what's going on that I get none of that.
Now, did that give us any information about Zuffa Boxing?
They did in the filing. They gave us some bits and pieces here and there about Zuffa Boxing. One thing about the Zuffa Boxing is that they said in the 10Q that they had a list of properties that they have equity in, and that TKO owns 7 to 50% in all of them. But the way it was lined up in order, it suggested to me, if you read it, that TKO has 50% of Zuffa Boxing. It's a 50-50 company. They also mentioned that they've already received, in quarter one, they received up to $9.9 million of higher management fees related to boxing for quarter one. So, I mean, and that in a segment, that's all pretty much as management fees, they're just managing a property. That's pretty much all profit. That's all net. There's very little expenses to that. They've already mentioned that there's tiny bit of expenses to that. So Zuffa Boxing, because they're not responsible for the other expenses, because that's picked up by the Saudis for these events, it looks like it could just be pure, we could be looking at 40, 50, 60 million in profit or net income for TKO or because of this entity. So it looks like it'll be incredibly lucrative for them. In addition, they also had a note that Nick Khan is up for a $5 million special performance award related to Zuffa Boxing once they've fully vested into the initial profit units of Boxing Holdco, LLC. And I should explain that. Boxing Holdco, LLC, is the company that they jointly own with the Saudis. So that's Zuffa Boxing. It's like how Zuffa used to be, the Zuffa was the company, but UFC was the name everybody uses. Boxing Holdco is the company that does business as Zuffa Boxing. Yeah, they just cannot stop making this as complicated as possible. And what they mean by fully vested is they have certain targets they have to hit and certain things they have to do, like, get negotiated rights, hit a certain level of revenue. And the 50% shares they own, they vest, they get ownership of it, in other words, and they're allowed to acquire it, allowed to access it. And so if they hit all these marks, eventually they'll fully get their full 50%. And when they do that, Nick Khan is due for a $5 million bonus, and they will have 50-50 split with the Saudis.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I saw something about Nick Khan's employment, future, etc., being tied to Mark Shapiro's. How does that work?
Well, that's a good question. There is a person of importance. I can't remember the exact terminology they used for that. I think it was it Brandon Thurston that had it posted on. Yes. I saw that on Post Wrestling had it. And what that is that's a key man provision, I think it was. I'll have to find it. But anyways, Mark Shapiro is a key man. And if he leaves, Nick Khan can leave, resignate, put in a notice, and leave within 90 days. And so that's part of his employment deal. And I think he gets some of his bonuses if he does that. So he's lined up for several bonuses based on he's got a base salary. I think his base salary is $3 million now per year, starting in 2027. 2026 it will be for through the end of this year. It is $2 million, only $2 million. I don't know how he's going to survive. Then next year it goes to $3 million, and then there's a bonus, incentive bonus, I should say, tied to it. Which if he hits, determined by the governing body, their sole discretion, the bonus could be 150% his base salary for this year. And then for next year, it could be 200% his base salary. And then for each remaining calendar year. And then he gets TKO equity of up to the signing equity award consists of $11 million in restricted stock. In addition to that, he gets an annual equity award of various amounts. And then there's finally that Zuffa Boxing Special Performance Award. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say this guy is not going to be starving. Him and his family will not be unable to pay their bills anytime soon.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I mentioned Mark Shapiro, so the next several questions are going to revolve around him and the things that he said on the TKO earnings call. Now, the first thing that really caught my eye was his confirmation that the Saudis will not be pulling up their investment stakes in TKO properties. Is that mostly due to TKO's very powerful ties to the Trump administration? Or is it more because the Saudis have invested so much into the Paramount Warner Brothers deal? And obviously UFC being with Paramount says that, hey, we're gonna keep our investments right where they are.
Yeah, I don't know if it has. I don't know what it has to do with either. To tell you the truth, I mean, it might have. The possibility could either one could be true. It could also very well be the fact that the Saudis. Well, first we should know this is Mark Shapiro saying this. This is not. We do not know the reality of the Saudi situation. Maybe they would pull the plug on these ventures with TKO, which is mostly massive site fees with WWE and UFC, and other ventures like that. Maybe they pull the plug because the financial situation in the Gulf gets so perilous. And maybe Mark is just saying this because either he believes it or because he wants to make sure that investors are not scared by the possibility that they might pull out a large sum of money that adds up to their revenue, that adds on to the revenue. So that's another possibility. The other possibility is the Saudis have some sort of contract commitment that they've guaranteed TKO. Another possibility is that even though they've dropped Live Golf and other stuff, that WWE and UFC have proven so popular in Saudi Arabia that they've guaranteed that they're going to continue doing it no matter what. I don't know what the truth of the situation is. My guess, though, my gut feeling is whatever it is, there's been some commitment made, some clarification to Shapiro and the other executives at TKO that the Saudi investment, the Saudi payments going forward will continue, that they will still want to pay the UFC and WWE and their other entities to come to Saudi Arabia for whatever reasons, because of their connections, because of the product itself, whatever, but that the money train is not going to dry up anytime soon for them. Everybody else it might, but not for them. And I think they really want to get that message out too.
Do you see any scenario where they might be forced to dump their stake in, like, say, Zuffa Boxing?
Well, the Zuffa Boxing is interesting because they have a stake and a commitment to TKO. I don't see them dumping it. I mean, I could see them, if they had to sell it off, they would sell it off. But that's one. I think the whole plan, the reason they went with TKO is the plan is to not spend money like they have on their other properties, to actually turn it into a moneymaker. And I think so for that reason, they will stay committed to Zuffa Boxing. And as I think Lou DiBello brought up the idea, and it might be true, is that the money that's been committed to Zuffa Boxing has already been committed somewhere. It's been invested somewhere. It's sitting somewhere. They have access to it, or they know they can get it. And so that's not going to vanish, that the Saudis have made that commitment and they're going to have to spend it. And if Lou DiBello is correct, and that's true, then I don't see them dropping, pulling up on Zuffa Boxing. Other stuff, I could see them cutting the spending on the site fees to bring major TKO events to Saudi Arabia, all these other stuff, because if they were having financial straits, if they really did have to tighten their belt tremendously, they might look at that and say it's just not worth it. But the Zuffa Boxing, I do think they look at it under TKO's plan as this is a venture that they expect to get a return on, unlike some of the other boondoggles they've been involved with lately. And so they are not going to pull the plug on that one.
Once again, Shapiro reinforced the plan to keep their scheduled events in the Middle East on track. Like, they are, according to him, they are going to all of those dates over there. Do you think that's a wise move? I know we've talked about this before, but things have escalated so much more.
I mean, you think there'd be some hesitation, there'd be some concern. This reminded me of somewhat of Dana White during COVID. Dana made a big deal like, oh, the media, you guys just don't want us to even try to even hold an event. And the general consensus, at least people I talked to in the media, and I remember doing an episode of Show Money with Jason Cruz and Paul Gibb, where we talked about this. None of us said don't do events. We just thought it just did not seem wise when the COVID epidemic was just starting, and the public, no one really had an idea of how deadly the virus was, right? We did not know what the fatality rate was, the infection rate. There had been, some which proved to be completely wrong, inflated numbers were emerging, but we didn't know exactly what we were dealing with yet. And yet they were just gung-ho to an event instead of saying, as we all suggested, I believe on the show, why not just sit 2 to 3 weeks? And, collect the data, collect the best procedures to go forward, and then start planning an event. And they were unwilling to do it. And the reason we know, in hindsight, it seems very obvious, is because Endeavor with all the massive debt they had at the time, they had no business operating except the UFC, and they had no way to keep money coming in. And so the company was in trouble, except for the broadcast license fees the UFC could get. And so they needed the UFC to operate at that time because they were a majority shareholder of the UFC. So any money made could then be sent to Endeavor, who could then use that to keep afloat. And there's a little bit of feeling, it feels a little bit like that here. Now, the difference is TKO is not in any real risk or trouble. None of their companies seem to be risk. They're all just awash in money. But maybe they're addicted to having money coming in. And so they don't seem to want to step back and pause at all. And that might demonstrate or might be the reasoning behind why the Saudis are still committed to them, because they know that they're going to show up no matter what, that their events will be held there. And for that reason, they want to continue doing business with TKO. And also think it demonstrates how much money they get from the Saudis. I mean, the site fees are supposedly enormous, for fight nights, 20, 30 million, for pay-per-view hire, 50, 75 million, some ridiculous number supposedly being paid for some of these premium events for WWE. You add that up and you're probably talking a couple $100 million a year in revenue being generated in Saudi Arabia, which is not a large population, which is not, the individual Saudi is not paying that much for these events, but the government is willing to spend a ton to bring TKO events there. I think that kind of explains the gung-ho nature why they're so obsessed with continuing to go there, as well as Azerbaijan apparently has signed a long-term deal that's going to pay them a fortune as well. As long as you're willing to pay them a lot of money, they are willing to risk the lives of their talent.
CFO Andrew Schleimer said that fighter compensation continues to grow as, and I quote, "we would never turn a blind eye to our most meaningful investment." Now, he only cited the doubling of the bonus structure. So my question is, have you heard through any of the birdies that are on your rumor vine, all of the little fighter birdies that show you their contracts, et cetera, have you heard whether they've made any increases at all to regular compensation, not the bonus stuff?
Well, individual fighters, I've talked to several managers and others, fighters and stuff, people that have had new contracts issued to them. And there are several fighters that have gotten new deals, and they're rumored, other people have said that they've heard this guy got a new deal that's very lucrative compared to what UFC typically pays. So it seems several fighters got new contracts, but other fighters have not. So it's impossible to say that the UFC is like, oh, we're going to pay all the fighters more, or the fighters as a whole, as an aggregate, are getting paid more, because I just don't have the information. I have information that some fighters are getting paid more. Some fighters have better deals. But is that because of the Paramount deal and the UFC decided to, cut these guys in on it? Or is that just the natural, changing of the guards, the contract ends, a new contract signs, and that fits the TKO's pre-existing formula for what fighters should get paid? I'm not certain. I know apparently the big champions that are going to be fighting at the White House event, they're supposedly pretty well paid by UFC standards. I'm not guessing, I should say the word is that they're around the Khabib level of pay now. Khabib was 10 million, not Conor McGregor level, but Khabib level, or John Jones or Brock, at 8 to 10 million. So they are in the upper echelon of UFC payouts, but they were paying other fighters before that. So is that breaking new ground or not? I'm not certain. And again, we don't know, but here's what we do know. They have doubled the bonuses. And so that adds $200,000 per event that the UFC pays now $200,000 per event that the UFC pays out in bonuses. So we know they've done that. And we can look at some of the information we got to kind of get a sense of, did the UFC, are they raising pay? Are they lowering it? And so if we look at their revenue this year, that first quarter, it was 401 million, 51 million more. So if they're paying an additional 2 million on that money, and if that's all they're paying, well, that is about less than, that's like that's actually, I should say that's 4% of the additional revenue they're getting, right? And so that's less than, if fighters are getting at least, 15, 20%, right, of all the revenue, the fighter bonuses should be 15 to 20. If that's all that's being increased or fighter bonuses, then you'd expect them to be about 15 to 20% of what the new increase in revenues, the additional 50 million. So it would be an additional, 10 million or so would keep it on the same plane. And that's not it. So you hope, you pray that the increase in pay is not exclusively the bonuses, because that is a small percentage. That is, again, they had 8 events, an extra $200,000, 1.6 million. That of total revenue, that is 0.8% of the total revenue this quarter. So that would not be a massive increase to fighter pay, would it?
No.
The other way to look at it, though, this is perhaps a little more positive towards the UFC. If we want to be a little fairer here, we can look at their direct operating income, how much that's gone up. And we can infer, based on their direct operating income, their total revenue, that their total revenue went up about 10%. And their direct operating income, which includes fighter pay, went up about 10%. And that suggests, from that amount, it's impossible to tell, what total fighter pay was, something like that. But they did have a note that the pay, that the revenue, the expenses, say direct operating expense, went up a certain amount because of fighter pay, because that increased as well. And if we assume that the entire direct operating expense was entirely due to fighter pay, then that means that 10% increase in direct operating income matched the 10%. If it actually all went to fighter pay, then that would mean fighters actually, their percentage of revenue went up. If the fighter pay went up equivalent of that increase in direct operating pay income, I should say, if that went up the same amount let's say fighters get 15 to 20%, and 15 to 20% of that increase in direct operating costs went up that much, that means fighter pay stayed the same. And if a lower percentage, fighter pay went down. So it's kind of impossible to tell. But just based on the very fact that direct operating costs went up 10%, the same amount that the expenses or the revenue went up. Right now, I'm leaning to the idea that maybe fighter pay is staying in line as a percentage of where it is now, and that's just kind of a guess. We might have a better picture over the quarters as they report more and more of the change in expenses and how much is related to fighter costs. But right now, I'm going to lean to the idea that perhaps, that fighters are not getting a higher percentage, but they also might not be getting a lower percentage.
So it seems like status quo has been maintained.
Status quo has been maintained. They've hit perfection at this point. Why change perfection?
All right, now this story, this one has me in a quandary, okay? I could not believe my eyes when I saw this. It was reported that UFC has partner investment. I'm using that in quotes because that's what they call it. Partner investment. Specialty tickets for the White House event. Now, I'm going to let you tell all the details because there's one in particular, the cost, that just blew me away. To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!